Ah, hello. Which one of us are you?
Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. The final episode of Loki is nigh, hopefully serving as a satisfying conclusion to one of the most unique projects the MCU has ever made. But we still have a lot of unanswered questions, with the biggest one being, who is the head of the TVA? Well, there is more than enough evidence that it could be Kang, which makes sense. The show deals with time travel, and Kang is all about time travel, but I wouldn't place my bets just yet.
I need all the files on the founding of the TVA. Everything from the beginning of time.
Well, that's a mighty tall order.
Whoever created this place is in danger. I need to find them.
But what if the villain that was actually pulling the strings all this time is Loki? Not this Loki, but another Loki variant, an evil Loki who's been running the show all along.
The timekeepers have built quite the circus. And I see the clowns are playing their parts to perfection.
Okay, but first let's talk about Kang, because at this point everyone assumes that episode 6 will introduce him as the big bad of the show and the secret head of the TVA. Now there's plenty of evidence to point to Kang, and we ourselves made a video theorizing on how Kang might be the big bad of the show. And even since then, in episode 5, we saw Kang Tower, and that was a corporation front used by Kang in the comics. Time travel is what Kang is all about, and it all fits. So is it possible that Jonathan Majors will show up in episode 6?
Maybe. Maybe not.
Do I honestly believe it'll happen? No, not really. All the MCU shows so far have been subverting our expectations. Marvel throws Easter eggs at us, teases us with exciting possibilities and cameos, only to pull the rug out from under us.
You're Ralph Boner?
Boner.
Now that doesn't mean these shows are bad, not at all. It simply proves that we all need to curb our fan theories. While it's fun to theorize and try and overthink every little Easter egg, these shows aren't about that. All 3 MCU shows so far have been about personal stories and the struggles of these characters with their identities and their place in the world. And with that in mind, I don't think Kang's going to appear in the final episode of Loki. Adding Kang out of nowhere might be a fun nod to the fans, but it's going to detract from Loki's story, because this show has been about Loki and the other Loki variants. Kang might still appear in some smaller capacity like a post-credit scene tease, but the big bad of the show is most likely Loki, an evil version of Loki.
Come on. What did you expect?
Think about it. The twist with the Timekeepers is very much like the Wizard of Oz reveal, and the man behind the curtain wasn't some all-powerful wizard, but just a guy with clever illusions. And that's what Loki is, someone who glorifies himself with illusions and lies. The show is about Loki's growth and transformation, his chance to break free from his cycle. In the first episode, Loki faced the depressing realization that his story was already written, and he's incapable of rewriting his fate.
But you ridiculous bureaucrats will not dictate how my story ends!
It's not your story, Mr. Laufeyson. It never was.
He's meant to always lose, meant to always live in the shadow of those who are better than him, and eventually to be killed off by Thanos.
I am Loki of Asgard, and I am burdened with glorious purpose.
All of his life, he was so sure that he wanted to rule Asgard and Earth, prove he's better than Thor, and become the mighty and feared villain that will get respect and worship. But in truth, Loki just wanted acceptance and love, which is why he was trapped in an endless cycle of failure and bitterness.
You are alone, and you always will be.
That's something we spoke about in this video, diving deep into Loki's struggle with identity. It's only once he accepted the truth about himself and tried to break free of his cycle that he achieved redemption, but at that point, it was too late for him. But the new Loki has a rare opportunity to reinvent himself, change, break free from the cycle, become the hero of his own story instead of the tragic villain in someone else's. As well as meeting all the other Loki variants, seeing just how pointless his glorious purpose really is. Like classic Loki, who ended up being a lonely old man filled with regret.
I got lonely. To tell you the truth, I missed my brother.
And most importantly, Loki is learning to love himself by literally falling in love with himself. Sylvie.
What a incredible seismic narcissist! You fell for yourself!
But by learning to love himself, he learns to accept who he truly is, and acceptance is the only real way to change. This is why Loki was able to form such a strong connection with Mobius, who knows Loki better than anyone. Mobius sees Loki's potential. He believes that Loki is capable of change.
Thank you, my friend.
But to complete his transformation, Loki must face himself. And in the show, it's not just a metaphoric clash, it's literal. It's only fitting that Loki's big bad villain will be himself, because he has always been his own worst enemy. And I think we already saw the evil Loki in the trailers, which might be this Loki.
Glorious.
This evil Loki should be played by Tom Hiddleston and serve as an evil mirror image to Loki. The difference is that the evil Loki never changed, never broke free from his loop, and instead got sucked into a pit of hatefulness and loss. He may be inspired by King Loki from the comics, especially since the show has taken a lot of inspiration from the comic Agent of Asgard. It fits, since that evil version of Loki used time travel as well.
Okay, fine. Willing to accept that. Why are there so many of you?
Because Loki survived. That's just what we do.
So here's how I think this might play out. The Timekeepers were real, at some point. Maybe they created a sacred timeline with Kang's help, which would explain all the little Kang Easter eggs we found in the show. The TVA used to oversee the proper flow of time, but then captured a Loki variant, the evil Loki. Since the TVA security is spotty, evil Loki was able to escape just like Sylvie did. Using his magic and tricks, he was able to outsmart the TVA and somehow take over. Maybe the Timekeepers were too arrogant with their power and they simply couldn't handle a variant who broke free from his predetermined fate. That's what we learned. The variants can break free from their loops, and at that point, the TVA is at a loss. Anyway, evil Loki took over, killed the Timekeepers, and brainwashed the TVA into worshipping him like some kind of god. No one knows who's behind the TVA because evil Loki erased everyone's memories, creating the perfect illusion for the cult-like TVA agents.
It's an illusion. It's a cruel, elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear. A desperate attempt at control.
And since he's powerless in the TVA, evil Loki traveled to the end of time, building his kingdom in the most broken place in the timeline, representing his broken self, where he could rule the timeline unchallenged. Evil Loki lived for so long, worshipped by brainwashed subjects, that he lost the capacity to love, devolving into hatefulness. Since underneath all his bitterness and jealousy, all of his illusions and lies, there's a lot of self-hate.
It's the cruel, elaborate trick conjured by the weak to inspire fear.
Hating the idea that he can never be loved like Thor, can never be equal in the eyes of others. Evil Loki couldn't stand the idea that other Lokis might achieve anything better than him, or find purpose or happiness, or grow as an individual. He couldn't allow any other Loki to prove that he's nothing more than a lonely, bitter, and jealous megalomaniac. Hating himself so much, he devoted the TVA to hunting down Loki variants, who might also be a threat with him. And so, the TVA aren't actually protecting the timeline. It's all a lie. Their job is to hunt down other Lokis, prune them, and send them to the void, where Alioth eats them.
There can be only one.
And here's a theory about Alioth. Maybe evil Loki used it to get more power. Every time variants end up in the void, Alioth devours them, and somehow the life energy of the devoured variants is absorbed by Alioth, which is then sent to evil Loki's castle, feeding on the energy of the variants like some vulture.
The first and most oppressive lie ever uttered was the Song of Freedom.
This is the tragedy of Loki. Without Thor, his family, or anyone to push him in the right direction, Loki will allow his worst traits to rule him. Evil Loki got the ultimate power to control the timeline, maybe do something good and useful with it. But instead, he let it all fall apart, simply to make himself feel better. Confronting evil Loki is the biggest step in Loki's story, since the hardest thing that anyone can do is facing yourself.
I betrayed everyone who ever loved me. I betrayed my father, my brother. I know what I did, and that's not who I am anymore.
But even after Loki defeats evil Loki, there's still going to be one final test. It's one thing to change, but another to maintain that change.
It never stops.
You just know that Loki will be tempted to take over with his evil self out of the picture, take that godly power and become the new ruler of the timeline. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if evil Loki actually is our Loki in the future, and this whole series is kind of like evil Loki's origin story.
Yeah, wow.
Loki's life is about being trapped in loops, and this would be the greatest loop of them all. So, how would our Loki break free from his loop? Sylvie. When they held hands, it caused a massive Nexus event.
Two variants of the same being, especially you. forming this romantic relationship, that's pure chaos. That could break reality. It's breaking my reality right now.
Because the presence of Sylvie threatens the creation of evil Loki. Maybe by falling in love, they could make each other better, prevent themselves from falling into darkness. And instead of following in evil Loki's footsteps, they will break free of all the variants and start something new and better for the timeline.
Oh, it's so romantic.
And once Loki contemplates this final step, overcomes his inner darkness, fights his evil self, only then can he finally be free of his cycle. And once he achieves that, Loki can become anything he wants.
You can be whoever, whatever you want to be, even someone good.
And that's an exciting idea, especially if this new Loki eventually reunites with Thor. And maybe all of this could still lead to Kang. Maybe evil Loki left the timeline unattended for a long time, and that opens the door for Kang to come in and take over. And that's how Loki might end. Do you think that evil Loki is the big bad of the show, or will it be Kang after all? Or is it Mobius or Miss Minutes? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.